All right, so it is Christmas Eve, and you can probably hear my dishwasher going in the background, and it's still running from the previous upload that I made where I had done some dishes. But my mother has asked me to make some bread for our Christmas Eve gathering. And so I have all my supplies here to make a loaf of bread using my bread machine. And one of the reasons I really appreciate this bread recipe is that it's just so simple. The ratios are easy to remember. You don't even have to write anything down. And there's only a few simple ingredients that are necessary. So I thought I would share it with you. So what I have here is some basic granule sugar, and we're going to add 2 tablespoons of granule sugar. 1, 2. That's it for the sugar. The next thing that we're going to add is salt. Now, I'm sort of old-fashioned, and I keep my salt in a salt cellar, which is just a tiny little bowl rather than keeping it in a shaker. I find it's much easier to measure out when I'm baking. So we just want 1 teaspoon of salt. You'll also notice, if you look, that my salt is not pure white, and that's because this salt was mined directly from the earth and has left the minerals and ingredients that come straight from real salt right in it. The next thing we absolutely have to have for bread is flour. Today I'm using a bread flour, but you could easily use an all-purpose flour. The main difference is the level of gluten in the bread. Gluten is a protein that helps the bread to become stretchy, and bread flour has more gluten than all-purpose. We're going to want 3 level cups of flour. 1, 2, 3. The next thing that we need is actually butter. Now you could use vegetable oil for this, but I prefer to use real fats. I might use avocado oil, or I might use sunflower seed oil, but I find that real butter gives the best flavor. So we're going to want 4 tablespoons or a 1/4 cup, which is exactly half a stick. And you don't have to melt it or anything. You can just put it right in there, and as the dough rises, the butter will melt. My bread machine does have a heating element that happens during the rising period. If your bread machine does not have that, you will want to make sure that you melt the butter. The next thing that we're going to want to add is warm water, which I'll get warm right now from the sink. So we're adding exactly 1 cup of warm water. You know, this cup looks a little scant. I think I sloshed some. I'm going to fill it all the way to the top. There we go. Don't want a dry loaf on our hands. Okay. So that's all there is to it, essentially. We've added, just so you can remember, we added 2 tablespoons of granulated sugar. We added 1 teaspoon of salt. We added a 1/4 cup of butter, or 4 tablespoons of butter, which is the same measurement. We added 3 cups of flour and 1 cup of warm water. But we're not done, because we still have to add the yeast. So here's my bread machine. We're gonna close the lid. Now my yeast for my bread machine goes in this little compartment here. So we're gonna go ahead and get out our yeast. They make these little rattling sounds. You don't have to buy bread machine yeast for this recipe, which I appreciate. You can just use active dry yeast. And we're actually adding quite a bit of yeast to this recipe because we're going to cook it rather fast. So we'll customize our size. We're doing a rapid bake. It is a large loaf, and our crust we want to be light. And then we will press start, and we'll be ready to go. It's going to take approximately 2 hours to cook, and it'll start to spin around. We'll hear it kneading, and so forth over the next 2 hours. It'll both knead it and rise it, and then bake it right inside this little box. So it's easy as that, and then when you're done, you have a fresh loaf. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope that you enjoyed this recipe.